aware of the project, and we want to really encourage you to participate. We are also joined by Samantha Musoke, who is the IFR for NPO Project Director for Humanitarian. Samantha has vast experience, of course, in NPOs, has worked in Uganda for over 20 years. He's a chartered accountant in the UK, and of course, he's a member in good standing with ICPAL. And she has a lot of experience because she's been in consulting, she's been an educator, she is a board member in various organizations, to mention but a few. This meeting, it is actually going to be in the form of a webinar. It's a webinar, but in the form of a meeting. So we are online rather than in person, and we have built-in time for small group discussions. And we strongly encourage you to use the chat function just to ensure that we interact, we discuss, and get a feedback in between. So we'll have 2 hours altogether, and there are 2 blocks of short presentations with a small group discussion and feedback in between. So you might be wondering why we have a picture of NPO activity in the background, but we are doing this to ensure that at least when we talk about financial reporting of NPOs, we'd like to keep in mind that NPO financial reports have little meaning apart from the context of the greater work that NPOs, you can call them NGOs as most of you prefer to call them, the kind of work they do around the world and here in Rwanda. So we can talk about various things that actually NGOs do. There is advocacy, there is environmental protection, you can talk about education and research, the social services, religion, culture, among many others. Please, before we get started, we needed to first find out who we have today, but I came to realize that we have so many of our practitioners from ICPAL. Welcome on board, and we have a number of stakeholders from the NGOs themselves and even other members. First of all, I'm glad to welcome and recognize you all. You are very, very much welcome. And please make sure that you take a moment to introduce yourselves once we set off using the chat. We expect that you are just going to just mention your name, your role, and the organization that you are working for. Then again, I'm happy to introduce again CPA Chris Twagirimana, who is an ICPAL manager for quality and development, but at the same time is a member. Is the member of this project, and he serves in the technical advisory group of this project. So again, welcome, Chris. Without wasting too much time, let me now hand you over to the project director, who is none other than CPA Samantha Musoke. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for welcoming me and for having me here. I'd just like to say that we're about to start we're about to hit the top of the hour, and I can see more and more people are registering. So I think what we'll probably do is have our holding slide just for another couple of minutes as we wait for a few more people to join, because I know we're due to start on the hour. And I've disabled the waiting room so that people can join quickly and easily. And then I think we'll start from the beginning, if that's all right. We can start again Sunday on the hour. Otherwise, some people might have missed out on your lovely introduction, which would be a shame.
Yeah, the only thing that, you know, Rwandan people here, they respect a lot of time. They respect their time, and we wouldn't want even to punish those ones who manage to come in early, because I came to realize that this presentation also can take a bit of some time. So we need to balance between the two.
Okay, super. Let's get started. Now it's on the hour. That's fantastic. So thank you, Sunday. Really, really grateful to be with you here today. Very excited. This is the first, as Sunday said, actually the first of many country awareness meetings that we're holding all over the world. Rwanda is the very, very first one. So my name is Samantha Musoke, as Sunday said. I'm a CPA in Rwanda, in Uganda. I'm British, but I've lived in Uganda for 20 years. And I'm the project director for the IFR for NPO project. As Sanjay mentioned, we've got 2 hours lined up for you. So we'll get straight into that. If you would please, each of you, I can see there's quite a few participants here. Would you be able to introduce yourself into the chat? You can just go into the chat, maybe at the very bottom of Zoom, and type your name, your role, and your organization. So I'll just wait for at least the first person to do that now, if that's okay. Roy, brilliant, welcome. So if you can put your name and your role and your organization in the chat, that would be super. So we know who we have here. I have a friend from ISPAO from Uganda, super. Great, so please do keep on, as we move on, we'll just keep introducing in the chat so we can see who else is in the room. So we're doing this meeting in Zoom, but I want to just have a few tips to help it run smoothly for you. So for most of the meeting, you'll probably find that speaker view is the most helpful option rather than gallery view. But when we break into small groups, gallery view will be more helpful. So you can toggle that button at the top, speaker view and gallery view. And there's also a control panel that helps you to mute or unmute your microphone, start or stop your video, and type in the chat. But sometimes it's not visible. So to make it visible on a mobile phone, just swipe or tap the screen. To make it visible on a laptop, you can just hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen and the control panel should appear. So in general, please keep your microphone off during the presentation, but then during the small group time, it's really important you turn your video on so you can have a really good discussion. Please do feel free to use the chat at any time, and you can direct it to the host only, or you can direct it to an individual, or you can direct it to the whole group as is appropriate for you. Now, when we report back from the small group discussion, it'll be helpful if you can use the sort of raise hand function if you're a nominated spokesperson ready to share feedback from your group. And to do that, you click on the participants section of the control panel, and from there you can see the raise hand button to lower or raise your hand. So hopefully we'll have a nice easy time with Zoom together. So the first part of the meeting is really for me to introduce the IFR for NPO project to you, just for 20 minutes or so. One of the first challenges to point out is it's not very easy to say, and it's taken me a few months to say IFR for NPO without getting my tongue in a twist. And I know, especially in Rwanda and elsewhere in East Africa, NPO isn't a phrase we use a lot, and sometimes NGO is what we're more familiar with. But this project is for a range of different types of non-profit organizations, some of which are NGOs, some of which might be non-profit schools or different types of other non-profit institutions. So that's why the project is called IFR for NPO. I would like to apologize in advance just for anyone who's already familiar with the project, but hopefully with a bit of a quick reminder of the background, it will make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to the later parts of the meeting. So I'm going to start by showing you a short video, which is also available on the project website. We've tried the sound and it's sort of working, so let's hope that this comes across clearly. It's just a couple of minutes long.
Samantha, I think we may have to reconsider.
Okay, if the sound isn't coming well, we can stop it there. For those of you that weren't able to hear that, if you go to the IFR for NPO website, the video is there for you to download. It's just a couple of minutes, and it gives you a really nice little introduction. But I'll talk about some of the points that are mentioned later on in the presentation. One of the key points it does bring out is what IFR for NPO means, which is International Financial Reporting for Non-Profit Organizations. So we'll unpack that in the next few minutes. So if it's about international financial reporting, one of the really important questions that people often ask me is, which types of NPO financial reports is this project developing guidance for? We're developing guidance so that NPOs can develop financial reports that are consistent across different countries and within countries, that are useful for different types of users. But which types of financial reports? So as non-profit organizations produce very many different types of financial reports. So we really need to be clear on which ones. And this diagram, I think, can help us unpack it a bit. If we think of all the transactions of an NPO being entered into their accounting system, and that then classifies and summarizes the transactions to produce these various different financial reports. So some of those financial reports are for internal use, for decision-making by managers. But then if an NPO implements a donor-funded project, they're often required to produce sort of special purpose reports, specifically for that donor about that project. So that's what we've called their donor reports. And then finally, every year, the NGO produces its annual audited accounts. And these are also known as general purpose financial statements. They're kind of for all other users, the banks and the public and suppliers and partners and everything else. So in this project, the IFR for NPO project, we are focusing specifically on the general purpose financial statements and accompanying narrative reports. Now, of course, these different types of report are all connected because they come and they're created from the same source transactions and the same accounting system. And because of that, Humentum is also working on another project, and there are other projects in play to harmonize the donor reports and the donor reporting formats. That's a slightly different story. It's a story for another day, but obviously they are related and linked. But just to really be clear, the focus of this project is your annual audited financial statements, and we're producing guidance on how to produce those. So which stakeholders in particularly are being considered by this project? So I think we're responding to challenges that have been expressed by three broad groups of stakeholders. The first group would be the users or the readers of financial statements. So when we talk about these general purpose financial reports, they're aiming to meet the needs of a wide range of users, as I just mentioned. So donors, yes, but also regulators, service users, which you could also call beneficiaries or clients, depending, the public, banks, collaborating partners, staff, suppliers. So there's a really broad range of users there. Now within this group, obviously donors do stand out as being particularly large and influential. And if the requirements of the IFR for MPO guidance conflict with donor reporting requirements, if they're going at odds with each other, this will cause a lot of problems for MPOs. At the same time, donors themselves use the general purpose financial reports for due diligence and for understanding the organization as a whole. And for that reason, we are engaging with donors specifically in a donor reference group with a view to listening to their needs, but also presenting some of the difficulties experienced by MPOs when the donor reporting requirements conflict with other types of requirements. So that's the first set of stakeholders that we're representing or trying to address the challenges of. The second crucial group, and I'm sure we have some of you in the room, are MPOs themselves as preparers. And there's always a trade-off. So benefits to users in terms of having better information should be balanced with the costs to preparers. For example, some information might be interesting and useful to certain users, but it might be difficult for a preparer to measure. So there's going to be that tension and that trade-off, the cost-benefit analysis between those two different groups of stakeholders. And the third group of stakeholders is really auditors. Obviously, they're providing assurance about whether the financial statements present a true and fair view. And I'm sure we have some auditors in the room as well. You're at the front lines often of supporting a particular NGO to actually implement any guidance or accounting standards. So auditors are a really crucial set of stakeholders in this project as well. I should say we don't actually represent any specific group. We're just keen to hear from all different types of stakeholders and balance the different needs. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. So what is this project actually going to deliver? What are we going to do? So we've got some of the problems here. Some of these challenges that have been expressed by different stakeholders stem from the core problem that there isn't currently any internationally applicable standard for how NGOs should prepare their annual financial statements. Some countries have national standards, but where countries do have national standards, this leads to inconsistency between different countries, and when there isn't a national standard, we get inconsistency within the same country. And then for larger international NGOs, if you're consolidating reports from different countries, that can be very, very difficult and expensive. We're seeing that funders are saying that when they look at the financial statements of potential grantees, they find it hard to assess financial capability or understand the wider context. And that results in expensive and often duplicative processes for due diligence. So the fact that funders can't use the financial statements easily of potential grantees slows down grant making. So with all these problems, we believe that part of the solution is providing internationally applicable guidance for how MPOs should prepare their annual general purpose reports. And that's what this project is about. It's important to note that it would be up to a particular country to decide whether to adopt or align to this guidance and which particular NGOs within their jurisdiction would be required or allowed to follow it. So this would be up to, in Rwanda's case, ISPAR and the RGB to make that call. So the guidance can be developed, but it's up to any given country to actually adopt it. And funders can also, especially certainly in countries where there isn't strong regulation, funders can also recommend it as best practice. So the future outcomes really link to the challenges that we saw. So I won't read through them all there, but what we can see, that having clear guidance really simplifies and improves the state of financial reporting and ultimately results in a more resilient and accountable sector, which is what we're all after. One of the other really important outcomes from this project, I should mention, the last tick point here, separate from the guidance itself, is the creation of a global community of stakeholders who are able to engage and collaborate to solve sector-wide issues. And that has never existed before. Part of the challenge with this is that the sector hasn't been very joined up. So we're creating, as a project, we're creating a global community that can help facilitate that conversation, which is very exciting. So that's what this project is going to deliver. Who is doing this? It's important because if you feel that your views are going to be represented fairly, you need to know who's doing the project. So it's being implemented by two partners, Humentum and SIPFA. Humentum is a global association that convenes NPO professionals and inspires sector-wide change. In Rwanda, you may have heard of Mango. Mango merged with two organizations to form Humentum a couple of years ago. Then the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy is a UK-based professional accountancy organization. It has standard-setting roles for local government and charities, and also plays a really important role as an international convener on public sector accounting issues. And both Humentum and SIPFA ourselves, we are NPOs. So we're in the sector. We could say this initiative is by the sector, for the sector. Between us, as each entity, we've got, as project partners, we're well connected to a range of different stakeholders that are critical to this project. Now, seed funding has been, to be able to just launch the project and get it going, has been provided by the Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation, but it's not fully funded. And we're looking outside America for other funds so that it's not seen to be an American project, which it isn't. It's really a global project. Now, the project, we have some advisory groups. A technical advisory group comprises national accounting standard setters from 5 continents. And we have a practitioner advisory group, which includes preparers, users, auditors, and academics specializing in nonprofits. I don't know if you recognize a certain face in the top right-hand corner of the tag there. That's your very own Chris Twagirimana, who is serving on the technical advisory group, representing actually the whole of the East Africa community on this project, which we're very proud to have him there. So you can be confident that Rwanda's voice is being heard right at the very heart of the development process. So we're deliberately and proactively seeking to build and maintain diversity in these groups. And information about each member and the details of all the meetings can be found on the project website. It's really totally transparent. That's the goal. We're nearly there, but a little bit of an overview of the how and when. What's the overall timeline and the structure of this project? We've looked at why it's important. We've clarified what the project will achieve and who the project partners and stakeholders and advisors are. So now we'll get an overview of how and when. The project's been implemented in 3 phases, which is using basically a similar but speeded up process for all international accounting standards, if you're familiar with that. So phase 1 is the consultation phase, and the key output is a consultation paper, which presents questions for structured input from stakeholders. And we're going to talk more about this later on. The second phase is the development phase, where we analyze the feedback from the consultation and use that as an evidence base to draft the guidance which is exposed for comment. And that is called the exposure draft. It's like the first draft of the guidance itself. Then the third phase takes stock of the feedback from the exposure draft, puts through final changes, and we launch the final guidance, which we're expecting in early 2025. Which is a huge task, but really developing the guidance itself is just the beginning. The benefits that we've been looking at in those earlier slides will really only be felt when the guidance is widely adopted and used. And that's why there's really 2 key aspects to the way the IFR for NPO project has been designed. So one aspect is the technical rigor that's being applied in the guidance development process led by SIPFA. The other aspect is the stakeholder engagement piece, which is being led by Humentum. We're actively reaching out to regulators, national professional accounting standards, accountancy organizations. We're reaching out to donors and NPOs to participate in the development process, in the consultation process, so that when the guidance is ready, people are ready and willing to adopt it. It's not a big surprise. We don't have to start from zero just to build up to get adoption. So, do you want to know how we're doing with stakeholder engagement? I have a slide here that shows how things were at the end of last month, July. It's even more now. So we have, we've already engaged a lot of people all over the world. So the countries in blue are those 87, I think it's probably 90 actually by now, countries that have signed up, where individuals have signed up and registered their interest in this project. And they include a really broad range of stakeholders. So we've got both international and local NPOs, we've got their auditors, accountancy bodies, regulators, donors, and others. Now on this map, the yellow flags show members of the technical advisory group. So there's the Rwanda yellow flag is Chris, and the red flags show the members of the practitioner advisory group, and the black flags show the various country champions working to engage stakeholders in their countries to ensure their voices are heard. So already after, we've just gone about a year and a couple of months, but we've already got quite a bit of momentum and engagement around the world, which is very exciting. So that is the short introduction that we had planned. And now it's a chance to meet some of the other people in the room, find out who else is here, and share your questions and thoughts in smaller groups. We want to hear your reactions. So we'll be using a Zoom feature called Breakout Rooms. And once the rooms are launched, you'll see an invitation that says join a breakout room, which you should click. And you'll be taken to a new meeting room with a smaller number of people, probably 4 to 7. We'll have to take a look and see. So we'll shortly go over the instructions and questions you should discuss, but they'll also be posted in the chat for each breakout room, so don't worry. So once you're in the small groups, it will work better if you have your videos and your microphones on. So as soon as you get into the group, please turn that on. If you have any problems, you can use a feature so that you can ask the host to come and join you. You can sort of summon the host to come and join your small group if you want to. And when there are a few minutes left, we'll post a message to tell you that we're going to close the groups and you can come back to the main meeting. So here are the questions. That's it. So as soon as you get into your small group, if you could each just briefly introduce yourselves, about 30 seconds, not very, very long ones, and then maybe nominate a spokesperson who's going to be able to report back on behalf of your group. So the first thing then, number 2 there, is just to share any questions or comments that have come to mind just as you've heard this introductory presentation. Anything that you'd like clarification about. So questions or comments. And then finally, each group should choose to discuss either question 3 or question 4, because you probably won't have time to do both. So question 3 is, how might NPOs or regulators, auditors and donors in Rwanda, so if we think of the whole not-for-profit sector stakeholders in Uganda, how might they benefit from having internationally applicable guidance? If there was internationally applicable guidance and it was adopted in Rwanda, what might some of those knock-on benefits be? Have a chat about that. Then the other really important question, as I say, you could do one or other, but I don't want everybody to do number 3 and nobody to do number 4. What challenges do you see for stakeholders in Rwanda? One that comes to mind immediately, which I mentioned earlier, is this potential conflict between donor requirements and an annual audited accounts requirements. For example, cash basis or accrual basis, something as simple as that. But maybe there are other different types of challenges that you can foresee. Maybe the capacity to adopt or transition. I don't know. So it'd be great if you could discuss that. So when time's up, you're automatically brought back to the main meeting, and the spokespersons will have a chance to share some of the key ideas that you discussed in your groups. So I'm just going to create those breakout rooms now. Some people are still coming back from their groups, so I hope you had a good chat and a chance to meet some of the other people. So I thought it'd be a good chance to hear back from what some of the groups said. So would one of the spokespeople like to share just one of the questions or comments that came up in their group? Who'd like to go first? Share a question or a comment. Yes, Erin.
Okay, we had a good group, but we had a lot of technology challenges. People that had no audio, people that had no video, but we figured it out and got input from everyone. We did address both questions, but I'm going to focus on the challenges for stakeholders in Rwanda. One of the issues was about perhaps separating the needs of local NGOs from international NGOs, because for international NGOs, obviously the benefit is your connections. One of our team members, their NGO is from the Netherlands. I work with NGOs who UK, Belgium, US. If they have the same framework in Rwanda as they present to their international affiliates, that's a good thing. But local NGOs don't have that same need. Also, the smaller NGO versus the larger NGO having the resources to adopt the standards and the expertise to comply with that. Although one of the benefits that was brought up was if it's a common framework in Rwanda, you can talk to your colleagues about and get support, because you all need to have a common understanding of the standards. Another challenge was...
Can I speak to a couple of those points, because they're just brilliant, really, really important. And I think you mentioned how this might be more relevant to INGOs, to international NGOs compared to local. But I think one really interesting trend that we're seeing in the sector is an increased trend towards localization. More and more donors want to give to local NGOs. It's becoming a strategic priority. But one of the blockages to that is the due diligence process. And they look at the financial statements and they think, I don't understand what I'm looking at, because there's so much diversity within countries around the world. So one of the blockages to local organizations receiving funds more directly from internationally has been this, it's one of many, but it has been the ability to produce financial reports. So our hope as a project is that even smaller local organizations can get a seat at the table, if you like, by being able to produce financial reports that are recognizable and understandable to a broader range of donors, which could help them access more finance. So I think there's two sides of the coin. So that's another angle on it. And then your very, very important point about resources and expertise to actually adopt it, and how at the moment, as you say, you can't really talk to your colleague in another NPO very easily, because they might do things very differently, because there's a lack of standardization. And one of the hopes that we want is that we can produce training, anybody can produce training that's focused on one standard way of doing things. The accounting package providers can create software that can support lower resource organizations to comply, because there's one standard way of doing it. Whereas at the moment, packages like QuickBooks or Xero or whatever, they've got nothing really to shoot for in terms of how to produce financial reports, because there's no international standard. So I think that you're absolutely right. Those are really, really important issues to bring out. So Erin, you had some more.
Well, yeah, just one last one, and then I'll cede the floor to the other groups. But there were a number of stakeholders in Rwanda that we felt, in addition to ICFAR, that is important be a part of the conversation. One is the Rwanda Governance Board in accepting these standards, because there's project reporting that needs to be done to them. There's another organization within Rwanda. I've briefly met. One of my teammates brought up a NINGO, which is a group of nonprofits, NGOs in Rwanda, and they do a lot of advocacy and training and everything else. Maybe someone who's, if there's a member, can speak better to that organization, but definitely having their input. And then another team member brought up RRA, the Rwanda Revenue Authority, because NGOs now need to do tax reporting as of the new laws in 2018. And just making sure that the government organizations in Rwanda are embracing these efforts.
Right. Chris or Sunday, would you like to speak to that? Yes, Chris, you've
Yes. Erin, thank you so much for that, and we really appreciate. The only thing that I want to bring on board is that the stakeholders you're talking about, actually, they are also invited, and we engage them in person, and some of them actually had confirmed. But I'm also getting surprised that last minute they couldn't get on board. I don't know what has happened, but they had confirmed to attend this meeting. I just hope that during the consultation process they'll get on board, but we are very conversant with that, and we are going to continue engaging them. Thank you.
Okay, let me take over from Sunday. I was nominated to be the chairperson of Breakout Room 5. It's so surprising to see that we picked the same, we had the same pick with Erin. We also took up challenges. She mentioned our challenges that we identified are also not far from the ones that she actually mentioned. It is a bit difficult to speak after her, but I will try. I'm trying to present ours. So the first one that she talked about was the expertise. In our group we saw that it is the capacity issue in the NPOs, and it's not only in the NPOs. We see that for the current guidance of the IFRS and IPSAS, you go there and you find that even this existing guidance that are so robust, and people are not as still trying to understand them better. Maybe you see some errors here and there. But yeah, that's one of the main challenges that were identified. And second, the team member also mentioned about the cost of implementation. And the cost of implementation will go with the style capacity building, and it will also touch on the system they are currently using. If the system maybe does not match with the guidance, so it will either need to be updated, or maybe another system which will need to be taken on board. And that basically different types of costs that can go with a change. And that will bring me to the third item of change management. Every time there is a new thing, just people are always comfortable with the things that they've been doing. So you tell them there's something new that you have to adopt. There will be some setbacks during the implementation and adoption because of the change management. And another team member also mentioned something to do with time for proper interpretation. We say that 2025, come 2025, we have the guidance. But at ICPA level, maybe something that is also worth mentioning. It is well known that ICPA is the sole regulator of the accountancy profession in Rwanda. And in the ICPA law, it is clear that the private companies use the IFRS, and government entities are also supposed to be using IPSAS. So maybe there shall also be a need to revise ICPA law, maybe by the time we have the final guidance. Then after that, then there shall be a need for time for proper interpretation, basically the implementation part, because it's not like the final guidance will be there and everyone be understanding it. And I think that's a very big role that will be played by ISPAL, and of course with the stakeholders that were mentioned, like RGB, members of NINGO, yeah, etc. Rwanda Civil Society Organization. Yeah, that is it from our group breakout, 5. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Those are, again, really, really important observations. I'm writing them all down. It's really important to feedback. So just again, to clarify, well, not clarify, just to speak to a few of those important points. Towards the end of the project, sort of 5 months before the launch of the guidance, we've actually built into the budget the development of training materials, which will be freely available from the project website. Because obviously, as you've mentioned, this idea of transition, adoption, capacity building, and there's no magic bullet. I'm not pretending that a few online training courses will fix it. I know it will be a big ask, but certainly we are planning and have thought about providing those resources towards the end of the project when the shape of the guidance will be clear to support that process. And we're also, as I've mentioned, I think to Aaron as well, in response to Aaron's comment, we're looking to work closely with software providers, and many of them are already wanting to get involved. I've had, PS4, Unit 4, PS Financials, Technobrain, Navision. I haven't got QuickBooks yet. They're the ones I want to get on, but they want to know what the guidance will look like so that they can make sure they build software to meet the needs of users, which I think will be really helpful. The other really interesting thing you mentioned is about IFRS and IPSAS. And in the main group where I was with Camille, he also mentioned that, IFRS is a big deal. There's a lot to learn. It's difficult to comply with. There's lots of pages of technical requirements. And for that reason, the proposal at the current stage, which I'll talk about later, is to base this guidance, rather than basing it on full IFRS. Oh, Erin can help me with Intuit. Fantastic. Oh, thank you. Rather than basing it on full IFRS, the proposal is to base it on IFRS for SME. I think I have it here. Is this it? Oh, this is it's so little. It's like, it's a tiny booklet compared to a great big massive thing, which is the full IFRS. And the idea behind that is to make it much more digestible and manageable for smaller and medium-sized NPOs. Probably not your micro, community-based, tiny organization, but something that is more appropriate for smaller than just your big INGOs. The aim is to pitch something that's suitable for small and medium, and then the large ones can use it. That's fine. But the idea is to try and build something that addresses the key kinds of transactions that small and medium organizations face. Because IFRS doesn't cover things like how to report grants unless they're from government and you are a company. It doesn't cover things like how to classify expenses in a way that's relevant, or how to present fund balances. It just doesn't talk that language. So that's why we want something that's not IFRS, but something that's small enough to be digestible, so that we don't have such a big implementation jump. Well, it will be big, but to keep it as small as possible. The third thing, in response to your comments, my trumpet practice has started, my son's trumpet. I know we've been talking to the World Bank, and I think, again, certainly no promises, but it's conversations that certain countries are having with the World Bank to support adoption when it comes to it. Is that something that's a sort of infrastructure support that comes through the World Bank or the regional development banks? This is the sort of project that at regional level, they generally have indicated they wouldn't be against supporting. So again, there's time. So it's time to sort of get those ducks in a row and think, how are we going to address what is going to be a difficult challenge of implementation? I might just go and shut the door, excuse me. Is there another group or any other people who'd like to share their thoughts? There must be another group. Which was the group? Oh, Jacqueline. Yes, Jacqueline, do you want to come in? Oh.
I was in group 2, in group 3, and I was appointed to be the group representative by my colleague Eliezer and Nakato. We discussed about the benefits, and we found 3 benefits. The first one, it is that this system will be a response which will help NPO to have harmonized reporting system, because currently some use reporting system according each NPO or according the donor requirement or according the government requirement and so on. This harmonization of reporting system will be very helpful to all NPO, because it will be even easy to share experience and to learn from each other. The second benefit is fundraising, because currently when there is an opportunity for proposal writing, each NPO uses its budget. That is comparability, because as long as all NPOs will use the same reporting system, even it will be very easy for the regulator and different stakeholders to compare financial statements from different NPOs. Those are 3 benefits we discussed in our group 3. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. You broke out a little bit in the middle, but I think I heard you say the benefit of harmonization, the benefit of fundraising and comparison.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And comparability is a really interesting question, because I think even on the online forum, we've been having a debate. One of the members in one of our advisory groups said we should never even try to compare financial statements of non-profit organizations, because that's not what they're about. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, and we mustn't lose sight of the fact. I don't know if you were here at the beginning when Sunday says, we have photos in this presentation of NPO activity, and we mustn't forget that for an NPO, finance is just it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not why we exist, and what an NPO does and achieves on the ground in terms of impact, social, environmental impact, is much more important than whether it's made a surplus or its financial position. However, that said, there are still ways that we can look at financial statements and make some sorts of judgments about fund management, about liquidity and financial health and things like that. One of the things we want to guard against as a project, one of the misuses of financial reports, is when people look at them and say, oh, look, that organization has got an administration cost overhead rate of 25%. Oh, it's very inefficient, which we as a project don't believe is a good, useful way to use the financial statements, because what it does is undercut and undermine investment in infrastructure and organizational capacity, which is often seen as an overhead. So there are some, definitely some pluses and some pitfalls that we want to be careful to avoid when it comes to comparability. But it's certainly something that donors are asking for. They want, we've spent as Humentum some time training the staff in donor organizations who receive financial reports from potential grantees. And they have complained and said how difficult it is, because you train and to learn to understand, to read one set of financial statements, and then the next one you're presented with from another country looks different. So even if it's not direct comparison to say this organization is better than that one, It's just making sure you can see the overall size of an organization or its financial liquidity position, or something as easy as that would be so important. So Jeanette, thank you so much for sharing those points. And I'm really glad you picked on the benefits. I think that there are, just to sort of end, if I could, on this our feedback session on the benefits, we can see them actually really, really broad and deep, from donors to implementing organizations, more effective regulation and more trust, better fundraising, more coordinated service provision to NPOs, and overall just less wastage. I think some research was done a few years ago about the millions of hours spent in the non-profit sector just producing financial reports, exporting from Excel, redoing things in different ways for different donors, having to redo it in another way again for your audited accounts, which is a bit of a tick box exercise sometimes, not really adding value in the way it could do to the sector. So those are the things we're really excited about. And on the offside, we want to make sure it doesn't become a burden, something onerous for organizations to comply with. We want to make it as light touch as necessary to get those advantages without the onerousness of too much to comply with. That's the idea. So if they've got other questions as we go along, please, or comments, please do add them in the chat. So I'm going to continue to share my screen now. I've got a second part of the presentation, which is looking at the consultation process, which is here. So I hope you can see that. So I mentioned before the break that there's 3 phases to this project. And the first phase is this consultation process. So we're going to just spend a few minutes having a deeper look at that. It will be launched in January next year. So everything I'm talking about in this section is for you to hold in your mind so that come January, you'll be ready and willing to engage. And we're having meetings in very, very many countries so that by January, hopefully we have a large number of stakeholders ready to participate. So we're going to look at who should participate and why. We're going to ask the question of what does the consultation process look like? What is actually in the consultation paper? And then how practically do people respond? So first, let's look at who. Ultimately, everyone here is invited to participate. But the project will be particularly interested. We will really want to hear the views of regulators, as has been mentioned. They are very influential. They've got the authority to decide whether to adopt or align to the guidance in time. So the Rwanda Governance Board and ISPAR in this case, we will definitely want to hear their opinions in the consultation process. Auditors of NPOs, especially those who do entity level financial statement audits, as opposed to project audits. Funders, so those, if you have in Rwanda, maybe you have Rwandese donors and philanthropic organizations within Rwanda, or maybe you have Rwanda offices of international donors. Those funders on the ground would definitely be of interest because they're key users of financial statements. So we want to hear their voices and opinions. And then obviously NPOs as preparers, that would be your senior finance staff, your board treasurers. Those are the sorts of people that we would be looking for to participate in the consultation process. And then why? So without input from Rwanda, the cultural context here might not be reflected. If we only have input from the usual suspects in the UK and America and Europe, then it's not going to reflect the real needs and realities of stakeholders in Rwanda. They won't be reflected in the proposals that are put forward. So what we have here really is an opportunity to shape the future. Future generations can look back and thank you for creating guidance that is fit for purpose. We were talking earlier about this risk of it becoming too onerous or being too difficult to implement. Well, this is why we want to hear from stakeholders, so people can say, no, let's not do that. The cost-benefit equation here in Rwanda means that that would be too onerous and not realistic. So it's really important that we shape a future that fits our needs. And then the final reason is actually to build the credibility of the project itself. For example, if we get, I don't know, 1,000 people from 150 countries inputting to the consultation process, that gives us a really strong evidence base for the drafting. And it brings credibility to the project that will ultimately result in wider adoption. Because if we can say, look, so many countries have participated, we've got real consensus around these opinions, it increases the likelihood that any one country will adopt, and the more countries that adopt, the more other countries that will adopt. So there's a real knock-on impact to having more people give input, as well as the quality of the product. Is just the quantity and the geographical reach of input is really important. So that was a bit about the why. This is the what. So the consultation process is shaped by a document, and that document is called the consultation paper. It's still in the final stages of development. It's not final yet, but we're meeting with the advisory groups later this month and next month to put the final I's and T's on the final document. But it's around 200 pages altogether. You don't have to read all of it, but it's important to understand how it's structured. So that's what this slide is about. It's kind of giving you some hooks and some tools to understand how to get into it. So after the executive summary, the preface sets out the objectives of the project, what we're aiming to do. It explains who should respond and how. It's short and it's essential reading. So the preface is just short, but it's really important for everybody to read it. Then the bulk of the paper and all of the specific questions that we'll be looking for your feedback on are in these two main sections called Part 1 and Part 2. And we're going to look at these in a bit more depth shortly. Overall, Part 1 looks at sort of landscape overview level issues. And Part 2 takes a look at a number of specific accounting and reporting issues. Then there's some supplementary information that gives a bit more context about the project. And there's a glossary. And the glossary is important because some terms have different meanings in different countries. And there's no global definition of what this term always means. So the glossary isn't providing a once and for all definition at all, but it will be explaining the meaning of words that are used in the consultation paper. So when we have used this word, this is what we had in mind. So you might have a different meaning for that word, which is fine, and we're not going to change the meaning in your context, but just to help people read it and have a sense of what it means in this context. So as we've said, the overall shape of Part 1 and Part 2, we've had a look. So we're going to take a closer look at those parts in turn. And we want to give you a taste for the types of questions to expect in Part 1 of the consultation paper. And I should mention that these questions are really examples of those that have been considered to date by the technical and practitioner advisory groups. You can see at the bottom of the slide, just about, there's a sort of under construction sign, which is a kind of warning. These aren't final because the consultation paper hasn't been launched, but to give you a flavor, and we think we're pretty close on the big structure of the questions. So Part 1, Chapter 1 of the consultation paper is all about which organizations would be considered as NPOs, non-profit organizations, for the purpose of this guidance, which sounds simple, but actually is much harder than you'd think. And what the consultation paper does is it proposes some broad characteristics. So at the end of the chapter, the question is, the general matter for comment is, do you agree with the broad characteristics of NPOs that have been proposed? If not, why not? Which alternative characteristics would you propose and why? So you have to have read the chapter, you have to sort of understand the broad characteristics that are proposed, but then there's an opportunity to give a simple yes, no, and also to add free form your own opinion in an open question. Chapter 2 of the part 1 is all about external stakeholders or the users of the financial reports. What are their information needs? Now, obviously, the NPO financial reports are very different from company financial reports. The needs of investors in a business are very different from the needs of NPOs. So the chapter presents a proposal. It says these are the types of external users that we think would be reading these financial reports, and this is what we think their needs are. So then the question is, do you agree that the external stakeholders require information on ABCD? In the chapter, it's currently information on the NPO's achievement of objectives, information about economy and efficiency, information about compliance with restrictions and regulations, and information about long-term financial health. So that's the proposal. That's what we think are most important to users, but do you agree? If not, why not? What alternative areas would you propose and why? So you can see how it's really important for stakeholders in Rwanda to answer these questions, because if you've got a different idea, then now's the time, or January will be the time to share that. Now, chapter 3 of the guidance, of the consultation paper, is all about the aspects of the guidance itself. Again, it presents some proposals, and there's I think there's 4 questions in this chapter, but one of the questions is about whether you agree that the guidance should be accrual-based. The chapter presents a case for why the project believes that accrual-based is the best, most appropriate for the objectives. But if you disagree, why? Indicate what other approach or approaches might meet the guidance objectives and explain why. What challenges do you anticipate? So then there's 5 chapters altogether. So chapter 4 of the consultation paper is all about existing financial reporting frameworks. So firstly, the chapter makes the case that the IFR for NPO guidance must draw on an existing framework, rather than starting with a blank sheet of paper, just because of time and cost. And then it sets out the criteria for evaluating the usefulness of existing frameworks for this project and assesses them against this criteria. So there are 3 questions in this chapter, but one of the questions is, do you agree with the criteria that have been used to assess the suitability of the frameworks? If not, why not? Another question is, do you believe with the assessments that have been given? And this is the chapter where the conclusion is we think that IFRS for SME is the most appropriate out of all the possible options, and why. But it's asking you, have we picked the right criteria and have we assessed them correctly in your opinion? And then the last chapter puts forward a proposed model for developing the guidance. So as I mentioned, it has IFRS for SME, for small and medium entities, as its foundational framework. But then it also draws on full IFRS and IPSAS, and it even draws on country-level standards, non-profit standards where they exist to develop the guidance. So again, the key question, probably the most important question for moving forward with the guidance development is, do you agree with this model? Do you have concerns about using IFRS for SME? So you can see these are really a sort of overview level questions, and the answers that we get, basically give a mandate and a steer to the project team to proceed in a certain direction, rather than spending money and time going down a route that then people are going to say, oh, but you shouldn't have done it that way. We want to know now so that we can actually reflect that into the development process. So I hope that gives you a sort of feel for the types of topics and questions. And hopefully some of you have strong opinions and you think, yes, I want to make sure my voice is heard. And come January, you'll be itching to respond. Now, what I think I want to bring out here is that in each case, you need to carefully read the relevant chapter, and then you give a comment or a response to it. And it's this structured process that results in responses that we can really analyze and feed into the next phase. We can also analyze responses by region and by stakeholder type, which gives us really important information for engagement. If we need to reconcile major differences by region or by stakeholder type, we can have a go at working out how to reconcile those differences. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but it needs to be done. So at least we'll have the information if enough people respond. So that's part one. Let's have a quick look at part two. Now this part two takes a deeper dive into some of these specific issues. And again, we're presenting these issues that have been discussed by the advisory groups, but they're still subject to change. So don't hold me to these. So these are some of the specific types of issues that aren't covered in IFRS. The whole reason we're doing this project is that there is no existing international standard that gives us definitive guidance on how to cope with these issues. So for example, what should be included within, or how should the financial statements be presented? There's done in different ways in different countries. What's the right way? What should be the standard way? What should be included within the narrative reports that accompany an NPO financial statements? How should expenses be classified? What about income, these non-exchange transactions? How should they be recognized and measured? Especially when we're looking at grants and donations and gifts in kind that really aren't common in companies, and IFRS doesn't speak to those issues, and yet they're very everyday transactions in NPOs. So the answers to these questions just aren't obvious. There is no one right answer. And NPOs in countries without guidance have to make up their own answers on a case-by-case basis, whether it's NPO by NPO or audit firm by audit firm. And that's why we have so much diversity and lack of consistency. So you can see the topics in this part two are more technical in nature. We won't go through them all now, but the shape of each section in part two is the same. It presents some information and then asks if you agree with the analysis. That's part one. But then in part two, each section offers some alternatives. And then you're invited to state which alternative you prefer and why. So with fundraising costs, we could do it example one, example two, example three. Which one do you think would be best and why? Or have we missed something? Is there something else we could do? And you can see that this part two specifically really is aimed more at accountants. Part one can be for more general users, but part two is really more aimed at accountants. And we'll be planning to hold webinars on each one of these topics next year to unpack the issues, explain the alternatives presented, so that you can share your views from a really clear idea of what's being presented. So that's the what, if you like, of the consultation paper, the kind of meat of what we are actually wanting to consult on. And we've also looked at who should participate and why. So what I really hope is that by now you're feeling that you would really like to be able to share your opinions and perspective by responding to the consultation paper. So the only question remaining is how. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible to relevant stakeholders to share your views. One of the important aspects is that you don't have to respond to everything. If you'd only like to respond to part one or just one chapter of part one, then you can do that. If you have a really big interest in grant income, but very little to say about inventory, that's fine. You can respond just to the bits that you have an opinion on, which is, again, makes it more accessible and easier for more people to participate. When we launch the consultation phase, which will be early next year, the project website will have some videos. So we'll have videos about each of these topic areas. We'll also have videos about exactly how to submit your responses. and also just make it easier to engage. At the moment, it's lots of written information, beautifully formatted and very nice with diagrams and everything, but it's still a lot of reading. And we know that's hard going. So we want to put videos as well, just to make that more accessible. And then the website will also contain links to download specific sections and forms where you can submit your responses and different options. One aspect that we are struggling with is language. At the moment, everything is in English. Obviously, Rwanda has, in the last few decades, has become very English speaking, but there's obviously many countries in the world that aren't. So we're looking to the country champions to support with translation, and we're looking for budget for that as well. But we're only going to be able to analyze responses in English, which will be a challenge. In the middle of next year, we plan to hold country-level online roundtable meetings where stakeholders can discuss their opinions in relation to particular chapters in part 1 or sections in part 2. So I think Sunday will be hosting those meetings, and that will be a wonderful opportunity as country champion to take the lead in making sure that the opinions of Rwandans are collected and have conversations so that you can also input as individuals and or you can do it through ISPA. So I think from there, I'm going to hand, well, my final slide here. Yes, please, it's my call to action for you. The single most important message that I'd like you to go away from this whole meeting, please respond to the consultation process, because your perspective and your opinion really matters. So I'm now going to hand back to Sunday.
Yeah. Here we are. Thank you so much, CPA Samantha. I would like now to ask the participants if they have any question this far. This is the right time to listen to them. The floor is yours. You can either use the chat or raise your hand. Anything that you prefer to use is appropriate. Please, the audience, the floor is yours now. Any questions, any additions, anything you want us to hear from your end, please. Hello. Any questions, please, participants? This is the right time for you. We are glad that you managed to be with us for the last almost 2 hours, and we really respect your time, but now it's time for you to ask any questions that you might be having. You can either use the chat or you can raise up your hand and then we give you the floor. So does that mean that CPA Samantha has explained everything thorough to the extent that no one has a question to ask at this moment?
It could be a comment as well, a question or a comment.
Yeah. Anything. Chris, you don't have a question on your end? Is everything fine? So if you don't have any questions, then I'll go ahead to just tell you about the community forums because we're almost coming to the end of this meeting. So, but before we finish, we would like to tell you about our online forum for the IFR NPO community, which is the perfect place to ask you questions. You discuss your thoughts, meet other new people in the community. So that one can be found from the IFR for NPO.org website. You can just go to that website, you click forum at the top and follow the instructions to create your own account and then start the postings. I think that's easy to do. If you don't mind, you can do that. And to keep you engaged, please subscribe to the bi-monthly newsletter to keep you abreast of any new developments that we might be having. And by the way, you are very invited to participate, even in the consultation process. Samantha has already talked about that. Please make sure that at least your voices are heard. So you can even follow the project on social media. You can like, share any comments or any posts that you might have seen with your networks. So if you are excited about this project and its aims, please feel free to endorse it within your organization name or logo on the supporters page of the website, which is the ifr4npo.org. You will shortly receive an email with evaluation and link to the deck and meet recording. We will also correlate an email summarizing the question, benefits, and challenges identified and next steps for us here in Rwanda. I'm sure you enjoyed the meeting. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you so much for participating and also thank the main facilitator of the day, who is CPA Samantha. Thank you so much. If you don't have any other thing to add, I close this meeting right now. Bye.
Thank you, Sunday. We've given you half an hour. That's great.
Yeah, time management is always our thing. The participants were obedient and they managed to keep time, but we owe it to the presenter because he managed to move into things very fluently, very fast, and in a clear manner. Thank you. We just hope that